Good
Hi.
morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here. I know it's late, and we're here quite early in Hong Kong. Just could you just let's cut to chase. Could you just tell me a little bit more about the recent vintages? Because we've been tasting mostly 2020 wine, 2020 vintage.
Yeah.
So I thought it was claimed to be a very promising year.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. It was. It's been one of those harvests like in 2018 where we had a little amount of rains during harvest, but in 2020 we also had an quite low temperatures for a dry vintage. So it was a very concentrated vintage in whole, and
Mm.
it was very healthy grapes. So it allowed us to continue the research around natural wines or using less sulfates and while yeast was very easy to make this kind of development.
So you said it was a relatively cool and dry year, right? So you have a lot of possibility to discover all these styles. And I mean, you said you guys are more like because you're very close to the sea, to the ocean, to
Yeah.
the Atlantic Ocean. So it's very relatively cooler, moderate climate, closer to Bordeaux than Mendoza. But when you were planting tannat, I know tannat is very it can be a fierce variety. It can be very brooding, dark, concentrated, and tannic. So
Yeah.
I think most producers are trying to tame tannat with either like cold maceration or maybe micro oxidation, all that kind of things. What do you do with tannat?
I'm food engineer. My father is chemical engineer, and we've been developing for a long time. Actually, we even worked with Patrick Ducournau, who is the guy that invented the macro situation. So we've
Mm,
been researching or searching for this softening of tannins. We
mm,
don't use microcyclination anymore, but it's been very important for our knowledge and our research and learning curve. And we have a Paul Hobbs as our wine consultant since
mm,
2012.
mm,
And what we've been discovering in I think since 2015, we discovered that for tannat, what we like the most is getting the tannins from the skin.
mm,
Because if you analyze tannat as a variety, you have a huge amount of tannins in the seed. The
mm,
seeds are much more tannic than any other seed in any other variety.
mm,
And in average, you can have one more seed per grain. So
mm.
imagine more tannins per seed, and one
Yeah.
more seed is huge, the concentration. And this concentration is also very high in the skin of the tannat. So what we've been focusing in the past maybe 7 years is extracting the tannins from the skin and
Mm,
not from the seeds.
mm,
And this approach in another variety can be a little bit uh, too extreme. If we talk about the amount of tannins that you need for a high-end wine, if you go for example to a high-end Cabernet Sauvignon, in the skin you don't have enough tannins to have a structure and to stabilize color and to have a link between the anthocyans from the skin and the tannins have stable color and also have a nice structure. So you don't have enough tannins in almost all varieties in the skin. What we discovered with tannat, the amount of tannins in the skin is very high and it's enough for having a high-end wine and stable color and high-end structure. And that is only talking about concentration. If you go deeper into quality of the tannins, the quality of the skin tannins is way more sweet, and the texture is much more juicy than in the seed. If you go to the seeds are more rustic, more astringent, and usually they soften with time and with the polymerization with the anthocyanins. If you talk with a winemaker 10 years ago, it was proud to make long macerations where you have like this cold maceration, then fermentation, and then post-fermentation maceration. So you can talk with a producer in Saint-Emilion, and they can explain you how they extract like 40 days. And I am good friends for many of winemakers in Bordeaux, and I like those kind of wines. If you talk Merlot, Cabernet Franc, even Cabernet Sauvignon, when you go to Tannat, and in Uruguay, but I also know in Madiran, it's the same thing. You go to very long macerations, even if you have the best quality of the tannins in the seed, those tannins are so high in concentration that if you make long macerations, the wine would have so much concentration of tannins that even although they have really, really good quality, the concentration is so high that the result is a very astringent and like tiring wine.
I totally agree, because I see there are still wines made in that way in Uruguay, and it's kind of a really bad cycle that people do this with a lot of tannin, then a lot of oak to balance that. So the wine tastes really oaky, and then the wine is having that astringency and tannin, also some oak tannins too.
But maybe you've seen this less frequent than before, because we might be the pioneers in these techniques, but the purpose is very well like spread among winemakers here in Uruguay, and we all share this view, because 20 years ago we were very proud of this hard tannin, and this we had a review that called The Beast for one of our tannats, and we were very proud of this 25 years ago. This was in UK.
One of the reviews said you are the beast in Uruguay. Tannat is a beast.
One of our tannats was called the beast, like this hard, dark, tannic wine. The macho wine was one of the words they used to macho wine. It made us very proud at the moment. But
you're saying your wines or wines from Uruguay, like Deicas wines or wines from Uruguay called Beast?
This was given for one of our Familia Deicas wines at the date, but this could be said of any of the best tannats 25 years ago. And this made us really proud at the time. What we realized is that even in Uruguay, one every 20 consumers really enjoyed this kind of tannats, because it was so hard to enjoy. People would recognize that this was high-end wines, but most of them would never drink 2 glasses of this wine.
Yeah.
And what we discovered in our winery, especially when I started a more involvement in the winemaking of our family, is that if you taste a fresh berry of tannat, you can feel a lot of floral flavors. You can feel fresh fruit, and what is more impressive is the intensity. The intensity of these flavors is really high. It's higher than other varieties that we harvest here in Uruguay. And we were so focused on the tannins and on the structure in winemaking that we forgot about these flavors. And since the structure was very linked to the seeds, we were over-ripening the grapes, searching for the 100% ripeness of the seed. So all this makes sense because at the time, everyone was looking for these alcoholic, very overripe and tannic wines. What we discovered like almost 10 years ago is that if we focus on the flavors of the tannat, not in the seed, but in the flavors, we can have a wider spread of flavors because we can have floral flavors, herbal flavors, fresh fruit, and mineral flavors are in haze as well. Obviously, we can have some ripe fruit flavors as well, but we're talking about at least 5 different primary family flavors. At those times, we were always only talking about overripe fruit, only one type of family of flavors. And then we were focusing on the seed because what was the best way of making wines was long maceration. Our approach was what if we make a different approach and we focus on the skin, because the skin of almost every variety, the skin has a faster ripeness. So you can get ripe tannins even 2 or 3 weeks before than the seeds. And this was a very big discovery for us. This, and also that the concentration of the tannins in the seed was enough. And we started making crazy things like fermenting and macerating wines only 3-4 days of fermentation. And this, we avoid the beginning, like the concentration of alcohol in the wine was very low when we were macerating. So we only macerated from the skin, and the seed had a very little extraction. If there is an extraction, it's only from the surface of the seed. And this is the very best quality of tannins. So this approach made us able to extract only tannins from the skin. And we finished the fermentation without skins, without solids, like a white.
Yeah. I think that's one of the methods that a lot of people use. Like now they realized the seeds are very stringent, so they don't use the seeds and just finish the wine as taking the seeds and skins out, right? Even the skins.
Because it's very easy to talk about harvest early or earlier harvest because you have better flavors, but you have to be consistent in the structure and in the texture of the wines. If you make the same winemaking process and you harvest 2 weeks earlier, you're going to have green tannins and the wine is going to be very difficult to drink in every variety. So you have to be very careful about this.
Yeah.
And we discovered that with this technique of winemaking, we were able of making this. And this is not possible with other varieties. We've been experimenting this. For example, Pinot Noir has a similar difficulty in terms of the seed. The seeds the seeds usually from Pinot Noir are very tannic, and they are hard in tannins, and they are green, and they in every part of the world they are difficult to have a ripeness. And we tried to do this in Pinot Noir, and it's not good for Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir needs to have a long maceration in a softer way. In tannat, what we do, it's like making an espresso. It's yes, because it's high temperature, high mechanic maceration in short amount of time. Okay, if you think about,
you said high temperature. How what normally what was the temperature normally, like around?
We like to use as high as yeast can tolerate. It's not how do you call it, the thermovinification. It's natural fermentation, let's say 28, 30 Celsius. It's the limit for the yeast that they can tolerate to have a healthy fermentation, but it's higher than usually in high-end Bordeaux, high-end Californian wines. They like to use 24, 26, 28 as maximum. We use 28 to 30. Yeah, 30, sometimes 32, because temperature enhances the extraction from the skin. And the other enhancer is the alcohol. And that's what we try to avoid. Alcohol is more important to extracting from the seeds, because the alcohol helps getting deeper into the seed. And that's what we try to avoid. And that's why we like to separate the solids very fast, very early, like 3 days after the beginning of the fermentation. This has given us very good results, but our craziness for research made us think, okay, we have good results with these espresso techniques. What if we go back and we use the cold brew? If you talk about coffee, the cold brew technique. Have you seen cold brew in images? If you put a grain of coffee.
I'm a big coffee drinker. I know the cold brew. It's like cold, long maceration.
It's long maceration with a little mechanic maceration and with low temperature. And for this, we need to find terroirs that really get the skin ripe, the seed ripeness at the same time of the skin, without having over ripeness of flavor. Because if not, it wouldn't make sense. But we do have some terroirs that achieve this in tannat. And we've been making this experiment of making like a whole branch without any destemp, without breaking anything, putting in the tank, and using low temperature and having as less as possible of movement in the tank, to make sure of having a healthy fermentation. And even we use like 2 months of maceration with this technique. We don't want to have carbonic maceration, because carbonic maceration is very interesting, but gives an identity to the wine in terms of flavors that is more into the process than to the terroir of the grape. So we wanted to avoid a carbonic maceration. We just wanted to have a maceration from the tannins, just like if you watch the cold brew, you see like this like the grains, they do have this black color moving like this, you know, like they like spider arms of a grain, you know. It's like it's crazy. But I imagine something like this happening in maceration of the tannins when you do nothing in movement and in temperature. And we had really very interesting results with this technique. It takes more effort in the vineyard and in the terroir selection, because you have to. But all this thought and this research make us go back again to the beginning, and so it keeps us in constant movement and research, you know.
Yeah, you see this like both ways actually work. Like a very short espresso, high temperature fermentation, and maceration, or a very long cold soak. But you have to select the best plots and best terroir that have that seed ripeness and have that skin ripeness too.
Right.
So you said you're going to do some. You don't like carbonic maceration. That's another way that a lot of people, I think, would use to soften the tannin, but it gives that kind of a bubblegum, floral, very floral winemaking notes to the wine, right?
Well, I love drinking carbonic maceration wines, and I have a good friend Pisorno. I don't know if you tasted his maceration, his carbonic maceration tannat. What I think is that the process has more importance than the terroir in that type of winemaking techniques, and that is sometimes that is what I try to avoid.
I think there are a lot of also people like just to over ripen the wine to get that seed ripeness. That is, would you say that was in the past, or still a lot of people are doing that, over ripen the grapes, have a longer hang time on the vines, because the grapes will finally get a little shriveled, and really will have better tannin quality of the seeds. Do people use that still? Do people still do that?
Yes, they usually they obviously do this. You have to understand that tannat as a variety is very, very different and very special. If tannat feels dryness for a long period during the ripening season, it blocks the interchange between the vine and the grain, and it's irreversible. You cannot go back. Any other variety like Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Merlot, when the vineyards feels water stress, they how do you say, like they stop, or they make more slow. They slow the process, but they go back again when they feel more comfortable. In tannat, this is stop. And what happens with you have in terroirs that you have a water stress in long period, you have a high percentage of the grains, they dehydrate very fast because there's no interchange, and only you have ripeness because of dehydration. And this gives over ripeness to flavors. And this is what usually happens in regions where you don't have humidity in a constant level. Usually happens in dry terroirs. The Malbec that is, the tannat that is planted in Mendoza, a small percentage, or tannat in different parts of the world that have dry climate. Sometimes it happens to Uruguay as well. So even in Uruguay, when we receive a high-end vineyard, we try to separate this dehydrated percentage of grains because they overripen in terms of flavors. And then actually we were doing a special wine with these dehydrated wines, like an Amarone from tannat, which is amazing, but it's like a reversion of the old style of tannat.
I think it all comes down to the market, because if consumers are really enjoying this kind of generosity, the sweet flavors, and also overripe fruit, jammy fruit, I think there are gonna be more, maybe not more, but there's gonna be people making that kind of style.
We, as a winery, we export a lot to the UK and to the US, and in those markets, there's many people that really enjoy these fresh versions of tannat. In Uruguay, consumers are still in love with the old style of tannat in terms of flavors, not in terms of structure, but in terms of flavor. Because Uruguay looks a lot to Argentina, and the traditional Malbec used to have this overripeness as well, this sweetness. So consumers look for this sweetness in tannat as well. What we do as leaders in Uruguay, we try to give consumers what is trendy outside Uruguay, and we are getting a lot of success with this, because even myself and my father, we're surprised how consumers that used to drink these sweet Malbecs and enjoy these overripe tannats, they are welcoming in a good way this new style of tannat as well. What they usually say is, this doesn't seem like a tannat. This is the first thing they say, yes. This doesn't seem like a tannat. And I get this comment in the last 10 years worldwide. People, if they know tannat in any part of the world, they have tasted an old-style Madiran or an old-style Uruguayan one, and they have experienced this rustic and astringent texture in the mouth.
How about 2022? Now, I think you are in the middle of harvest, or have you just finished harvesting?
No, we finished. Almost all the wine is finished, yes. It's been similar to 2021 with more rains than the average, or especially because we had since 2013, 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 2020 have been very dry and with very easy harvest for winemaking. Only 19, since 2015, only 19 has been slightly humid, but all the rest have been less rains than average in our history. So they have been very easy for winemaking.
This last question before we go, and how do people perceive orange wines and more? You said maybe natural wines without adding much sulfur. How does the market react on these wines in Uruguay?
In Uruguay, as a market is not relevant right now, but we, as a country, we are looking outside although the Uruguay market is big for the small size of a country. We drink a lot of wine, almost 16 to 18. I think it's actually 22 liters per person per year. So we are drinking a lot of wine. But having said this, we see outside Uruguay. We look outside Uruguay for this. Crazy winemaking styles. Yes. And we've been receiving a lot of attention from different markets with these low intervention or natural approaches. As a country, we are certifying sustainable viticulture. This year, we're going to have the certification. And we know ourselves as a winery, we know that we've been researching for many years sustainability as a concept. We've been producing organic wines, and we've seen the difficulties in Uruguay, especially for tannat, for organic production, and how it impacts a lot in a negative way for the environment, and how much better it is the sustainable approach with much more rational approach to the what you put into the vineyards and the environment, and how you engage with cleaning the machines that you use for the vineyards, and it's much better for everything. And we're going to certify as a country this year. This in the vineyard, and afterwards in the winery, we've been researching a lot since 2008 in my winery, but also I know that other producers are onto this development, and there's a lot. My personal approach is that we need to be consistent and honest, and say, okay, we would like to use techniques that were used 7,000 years ago making wine, no machines, and adding as little as you can add. But we cannot forget what we've learned all these years, and the knowledge that we have, and the possibility of analyzing. And nobody would be angry if you make a natural wine with a lot of analysis and microbiology analysis and seeing, okay, I'm having this increase of bacteria in this orange wine. It's better for me if I separate the solids and like 1.5 months of maceration is enough, and we will have a healthy wine because we know what's going to, we are ahead of what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. So if you see that there's a slightly change in volatile acidity or a slightly increase in acids, you know that there's going to be happening something in the future weeks. So we can anticipate, and without adding anything, we have the possibility of separating the wine from the solids or changing the wine from the tank and lowering the microorganism concentration. And this approach of knowledge, it is what I like to do is, okay, we know what's happening and we make use of this knowledge without adding sulfites. We have other tools for this: temperature, mechanic, movement, separating stuff. This helps a lot for making wine, and cleaning, especially cleaning everything, cleaning all the tanks before using, and this knowledge help us make very high-end wines without needing adding anything.
Yeah, just to make a more hygienic wines, like wines clean, natural wines, you need to be very clean. You need to, as you said, conduct all the laboratory study, all the the researches and everything, just to have an anticipation what is going on, and not to release any wine that is just too dirty and volatile. And the natural wine can be like that.
In our research, what's like very, very difficult to achieve is avoiding the use of sulfites after the malolactic fermentation, because the malolactic bacteria, they continue, they consume all the malic acids, and if you do nothing there, they're going to continue their metabolism, and they can produce a lot of flavors or flavors that are not interesting at all. And then the other key moment is bottling. Even if you have the best quality machinery, the process is a little bit too intensive in oxidation. So you can lose a lot of quality because the wine, it lose a lot of potential when it oxidizes so fast.
Yeah.
So that's why we use a very small amount of sulfites. After malolactic, looking for the microbiology, and in the bottling, looking for the oxidation. But even if we use there, the concentration is 10 times less than in a traditional French style winemaking.